Hey, Bill.
How's it going? Excellent. There we go. All right. Hey, you can hear me now. By my count, 3 shopping days left before Christmas. Everybody done? Yeah? No? You're not going to admit it in public. That's okay. I'm with you. We are completing our series, we're about to complete our series. We'll actually complete it on Christmas Eve, but this is Holy Light, and it's all about that people living in darkness that see a great light. This is where we have been. If you ever want to go back and catch where we've been, you can catch it on YouTube, on Facebook, on our website, wordserve.org/sermons. You can catch any one of these. You'll see that there's a series of questions and exclamation points in this one, and today we're talking about home. I know there's a lot of people home from college or home visiting from other places because this is the season that you do that. It's good to see some familiar faces here. But I have to ask, even as you travel back, are we really home? Is this our home? We're going to talk a little bit more about that. So it all starts with my story. This is actually Rana under moving boxes. No, kidding. Many of you may know that for the first 21 years of our married life, we served the United States Air Force. We moved 17 times. Now, that wasn't always city to city. Sometimes it was from an apartment to a house, but it's still moving. And when you got little ones, it's a challenge, even if it's just down the street, right? Moved 17 times. You know how many times I felt homeless in that process? 17. Actually, only 2. Only 2, and I say that because here's the way I define home. Home is not a place. Home is not a geographic location. Home is family. Home's a relationship. When I had my girls with me, and we kept adding girls, so then I wanted to move more. But, no, I'm kidding. If you guys are watching, I love you, right? But we always had the girls with us. It felt like home. Even if we were living in a tiny little, what they call temporary living facility. Anybody been in a temporary living facility? Yeah, it's a piece of work sometimes, right? Now, I was in the Air Force, so they're better than average. But still, it wasn't a home like you would think, with a little hearth and a fireplace. And sometimes we had to spend some interesting holidays in some of these really weird locations. But to me, it always felt like home. Now, I say there's only 2 times that I didn't feel like it was home. That's because I had to go ahead, and I was there by myself. Boo-hoo Bill, right? Yeah, big deal, right? But, and I heard about that because they had to move by themselves. So we're still married. This is good. So I always say that it's not a location. It's a relation. That's what home is to me. So I never felt, even though we did all this moving, I never felt like I was without a home. Now, I don't know what works for you. What do you feel like? What is it that makes you feel okay in the midst of chaos, in the midst of the moving, in the midst of the hustle bustle? And this is a great time of year to ask that because you are in the midst of it, are you not? It's crazy out there. Have you been out there? Yeah, it's crazy. Even getting to church this morning was a little bit of an experiment, wasn't it? I did not know that road was going to be closed. I did not know there was not a road there anymore, and so on and so on. The signs continually move. It's like a game of chess around here. I noticed they were kind enough to pull them off to the side of the road. That's nice, but come during the week. It's like Tetris, right? You figure your way in. So, and it's constantly changing. So what is it that makes you okay in the midst of chaos? That's my question for you today. Now, you're probably expecting me to say something like, Jesus, that's right. And that is true. Because ultimately that relationship that is the most important is that one with Jesus. Even in the midst of the storm, he can be a calming influence. Now, it doesn't mean that the storm goes away. It just means that in the midst of the storm, you're going to be okay. And there's a deep-seated sense. That's the peace that we're talking about, the peace that passes understanding. That's what Jesus offers. In the midst of all that craziness, you can experience the feeling that it's going to be okay. Now, I have a theory, and I want to test this out on you. I think there's one thing that keeps us from that peace more than anything. What would be your guess about what keeps us from the peace of Jesus any time of year? What is it? Don't be shy. Don't be shy. There's a lion inside of those lungs, right? What distractions. Yes, what kind of distractions? All over the place. Yeah, worldly distractions. So let me show you a picture, and you're going to crack up, and then you're going to go, whoa, that's pretty deep. Yeah. Oh, yeah. These are students waiting in line. Not one of them is talking to each other. They're all on a device. And you don't know what's on that device. You don't know what's coming through that screen. Only they do. And there's a lot of voices in this world that are going to take you away from Jesus. And I'm not saying that the phones are evil or that social media is evil. It's amoral. It's just a thing. It depends on how we use it. But there are people out there that will use it to create distractions. I don't know if it's telling on me, but you know how the algorithm picks up on things that you might need and then suggests things in your feeds? I keep getting these feeds on how to prevent doom scrolling. Anybody heard of doom scrolling? It's where you get on and you just one after another and after another. And I'm starting to get these advertisements for how to prevent doom scrolling. What does that say about me? Jeez. Probably yeah. Well, for me, it's always the innocuous things like, oh, well, that might help me do a better sermon someday. I'll look at that. For me, jiu-jitsu is a big part of my life. So, man, if there's a new technique, I'm going to go find that, and I'm going to use that, right? And then that leads to more and more, and pretty soon I've been 4 hours, and I can't remember a thing. I'm exaggerating. Don't worry. It's not that bad. But it is bad enough I'm getting doom scrolling notifications. So this thing will distract us. That's my point. There are many distractions, many ways that we can get distracted. But at this time of year, I want us to pause and reflect on what makes it okay for you. What gives you that sense of home when there's chaos all around you? And we're going to go to a setting of another person who was struggling with this idea of a home as well. You may have heard of this guy called Joseph. He was betrothed to Mary. In those days, being betrothed was the same as being married. They had the same expectations. You were the one-on-one relationship. You were betrothed to each other. You were to remain pure to each other. And all of a sudden, Joseph discovers that Mary is with child. How can that be? Now, to Joseph's credit, he was a righteous man. He knew that this was not good. He could not go through with this. But his righteousness was paired with compassion. And so while he could have made a big public deal out of this, and he could have shamed Mary, and by the way, by law in those days, she could have been stoned to death. That's how serious they took this. But he wanted to quietly put that away. Because of his compassion for her, he was just going to quietly let this go. And this is where Joseph's state of mind is when he gets a visit. Anybody know who the visitor is? It's not Jesus. It's right. It's the angel Gabriel, and he's got a message for her. So, for him, rather. So what we're going to do, I didn't give that away with the picture at all, did I? Guess who the messenger is? Anyway. All right, so Matthew 1:18 through 23. Here's a question I want you to ask for the rest of today. Is God with me? Because it's easy to say that in a setting like this. Oh, yeah, God's with you. God bless you. We'll give you trite phrases and little scriptures all day long. But when it really hits the road, is God with you? Because if he is, why is all this stuff happening? And you can fill in your own blanks. Why are all my relationships suffering? Why is my health suffering? Why did I get laid off? You can fill in your own blank. Is God really with you? Let's see what Gabriel had to say to Joseph. This is how the birth of Jesus the Messiah came about. His mother Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph, but before they came together, she was found to be pregnant through the Holy Spirit. Because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law, yet did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly. But after he had considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son. You are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from all their sins. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son. They will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. These are the words of God for the people of God, and for these words we are grateful. Amen. Let's unpack a little bit about what's going on there. Did you notice what the angel called Joseph? He didn't say, hey, Joe. He didn't say, hey, Joseph. He said, Joseph, son of David. Do you realize in this story, Joseph is of royal blood? You remember David, the little slingshot, the Goliath incident, King David we're talking about. That's who Joseph is descended from. But somehow in the course of years, that has all gone by the wayside, and Joseph's just a carpenter, just an ordinary man. Former glory has gone. And if we look back at why that happened, now I'm not talking a period of a couple of weeks, I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds of years. But ultimately it boils down to somebody got distracted. Somebody forgot the royal bloodline that they were a part of. Somebody forgot God. And it was an entire nation. You can read through the whole process. And here it is about to be reborn. And the angel knows this. He knows exactly who Joseph is. Joseph, son of David. Wow. Let that sink in for just a second, because if you're a believer and you are a child of God, you're of royal blood too. I could say, hey, Bob, son of David. Hey, Susie, daughter of a king. That's who you are. Have you forgotten? Maybe we've been distracted. Maybe it's time that we come home. He says this for a couple of reasons. And I don't know about you. I've always wondered this about this passage, because it says, the angel says, you're going to name him Jesus. Great. And then he says, he will be called Emmanuel. Was that his middle name or what? Is it hyphenated? Jesus, Emmanuel Christ? How does this go? Because we never hear this part, right? Yet it's one of the most significant things. So let me give you the 25-cent history here. Jesus, Yeshua in Hebrew is the same as Joshua, was the legend said, the prophecy said that he would be the one that would come and save people from oppression. This was the prophecy, and this would be Yeshua, Joshua, or Jesus, as we say. So yes, this is the person that's going to come and relieve the oppression. But here's where it gets weird, right? Because everybody's expectation was the oppression that they would be relieved from was the Roman Empire. They would be free to establish exactly what King David had a long time ago, or King Solomon. They were going to be an independent nation. They would be free from Roman occupation. They could do whatever they want. They could rebuild the temple, all those things. That was the expectation if you stop there at Jesus. A very human expectation. But the angel knows something that we don't, or that we forget. The angel knows exactly who Jesus is, and he knows who Joseph is. Joseph is the son of David. Jesus is God come down. So the heavenly perspective, Angel Gabriel says, and he will be called Emmanuel, God with us. See, the angels know exactly where God is. They keep track of him all the time. It's like an angel tracking system, right? They knew exactly who Jesus would be. So in the angel's eyes, he's saying it's not just a guy who's going to prevent oppression. This is God among you. So Jesus is what he does. Emmanuel is who he is. You see the difference? He's both at the same time. We forget sometimes that he is God with us in our midst. And it's an easy thing to forget because there are so many distractions. And it's not something that we stop and think about every day, but I think we should. So when it comes to the presence of God, let's look at 4 examples. And this is by no means exhaustive. This is just 4 points in history that I'm picking out as we experienced God's presence. At first, we were with God. In fact, that's why we were created. We were created to be with God in the garden. We walked in the early morning. We talked with him. He talked with us. It was beautiful. He gave us things to do, meaningful work to care for his creation, the garden. That was the first one. Who messed that up? I was going to say serpent, but hey, we have marital counseling available later. All right. But you're right, yeah, the fall. Everybody knows the story of the fall. If you don't, let me know. I'll fill you in. In a nutshell, we screwed it up, all right? So then we don't have that, but then the next big thing happens is the presence is with Moses. You're familiar with that story? God goes to Moses and says, hey, you are going to free my people from hundreds of years of slavery in Egypt. And Moses goes, yes, Lord, I am in. No, he doesn't. He goes, my brother's a good speaker. Have you considered him? That's his response. That's his response to the creator of the universe, asking him to do something. In all fairness, I would have said the same thing. It's not every day you see a burning bush, right? So with Moses, there was amazing things happening. And I often say, man, if I just lived in that time where I could see pillars of fire guiding people, if I could see clouds, guiding us across the desert, if I could see manna falling from heaven, and when I complain about that because there's no meat on the menu, these quails just drop out of the sky, I would believe. Oh, not to mention parting the Red Sea thing. That was pretty spectacular. If I could have just lived during that time when God was so active, I would believe. But they didn't even believe. Do you know what happened when Moses went up to get the 10 Commandments? They built a golden calf. And what are we thinking? Well, in fairness to them, they did spend hundreds of years in slavery. They may have forgotten a little bit of their culture, and once they're free, and it's like, woohoo, party's on. Moses wasn't there to guide them. They forgot God. They got distracted. They didn't have smartphones, and they weren't very smart. So they built the golden calf and had this great party, worshiping the gods of the culture that they knew around them. See, I think that's the problem we have sometimes. We worship the gods of the culture around us and forget about the God of creation. And it's easier to do with all the tools that we have today. So the presence with Moses was spectacular, and they didn't even believe when all that happened. So let's not just say that, oh, well, if God would just act in ways I could see, I would believe. No, it's no easier. It takes commitment. So then the next thing that happens is Moses did come back with the law. Moses left, Joshua goes, and so on, and then the law kind of became the thing. That was God's presence. If you followed the law, you were righteous. You were doing a good thing. How'd that work out? Anybody do that successfully? Only one. Jesus. I didn't even get the pitch off, and he already hit the ball, right? Yeah. Only one lived that perfectly, which leads us to, finally, God was with us in the form of Jesus. I can just see God upstairs going, geez, I sent all these people to tell you about it. I even wrote it down for you. What do I got to do? Come down there and do it myself? Yes. Yes, you do. And that's why Jesus shows up. He not only knows the law, he lives it perfectly. He lives it with the same combination that his earthly stepfather Joseph did. Righteousness and compassion together. I often think of that time, if you look at Mary's situation, she was considered, in not a good light. And I think what Jesus must have thought when the woman was caught in adultery and was pulled out there, was Jesus thinking about his own mother? How she was treated by society? Because it's pretty hard to believe that something like that could happen. But this is the God we serve. If you want a God that's predictable and knowable completely, you can make one up. People do it all the time. But if you want the God of creation, we're never going to get to the depths of who he is. So we just have to settle that we're never going to completely know God until we see him face to face. And personally, I'm okay with that. That's the kind of God I want. That's the kind of God I'll follow. So with us shows up. Now, in the process of us getting close to Jesus, because when we get close to Jesus, we really are at the home that we are made for. That's why we were made in the beginning, to be with him in relationship. That's how we stop being spiritually homeless. Because that's where I kind of see our society today. We're spiritually homeless. We're wandering around trying to find the right place for our spirit to settle, when in reality, there's only one place that's going to satisfy you, and that's that relationship with Christ. But a lot of times we will struggle against that because, let's just face it, we're in the messy middle. The messy middle is there was a beginning, Eden. There's going to be an end. It's going to be glorious. But here we are in the messy middle. And we suffer from the twos, the terrible twos, and I mean T-O-O. We either have too much or too little to go to Jesus. Too much is, man, I've done some crazy stuff. I've done some really, really bad things. I could never go to Jesus. Do you know why he died on the cross? It was for all that stuff. And for me to say I've done something so terrible that not even Jesus could be in my presence is to say that the God of creation doesn't know what he's doing, and that Jesus' sacrifice has limits to it. I'll let you say that first, and I'll step aside for the lightning bolt to take you out, right? I'm not saying that. There is nothing that you can do that Jesus' sacrifice can't cover. So let's just start with there. You don't have too much going on to approach Jesus. He can handle it. In fact, he already has. There's this place called Calvary and a cross. It's done. It's finished. So you don't have too much. to go to Jesus. Now, the other piece that we often think about as well, it's too little. My mundane life, Jesus doesn't care about my mundane life. It's just little trivial stuff. He's not going to want to bother with that. He's got all these things on his to-do list. Do you know where he was born? Do you know the circumstances? In a manger. And he lived a life for 30-some years before he actually started ministry doing, guess what? Mundane stuff. He knows mundane. He cares about mundane. There is nothing too little to share with Jesus. So your twos are out the window. You don't have too much to go to Jesus. You don't have too little to go to Jesus. He's there. He's with us. So how do we put this into practical action? How do I action this, Bill? How do I get close to God so I can get my spiritual home in order this Christmas? Well, we're going to cross the street. That's what we're going to do. So if you're teaching your child to cross the street, this is audience participation time, by the way. What things do you do when you teach a child to cross the street?
Look both ways.
Look both ways.
Hold your hand.
Hold my hand. Traffic rules. Crosswalk. Stay in the crosswalk. Man, this will preach. Will it not? Yeah, what's the first thing that you would want them to do as they approach a street? Stop. I was hoping somebody would say that. Run! Yeah, it's like a game of Frogger. Yeah, good luck. No, you stop. That's the first thing we do. So the first thing that we're going to do when it comes time to find Jesus is we're going to pause. Or stop, however you want to say that. So why do I say that? Because in this crazy, busy world, the distractions will keep us from that relationship. We have to stop and actually seek that. And guess where? He is with us always. We know that. It's us in our awareness that's not with him. That's why we pause. Now, this pause doesn't have to be huge or significant. It can be just as often as you need. And I'm going to share a technique that I always use, and you're welcome to use it. I told you before that in the Air Force, they had these emergency procedure simulators where they killed you 1,000,000 times so that you wouldn't actually get killed in the air. And the first thing they always said was, there are very few things that are going to take you out like that. So the first thing you do in any emergency is you fly the aircraft. You'd be amazed at how many people go, oh, there's a light. Oh, what's the light going on? Then they're not flying the aircraft and they go right into a mountain. There are accident reports, I'll show you, where people have flown a perfectly good airplane into a mountain because the light was malfunctioning. Talk about a distraction. So the first thing they say is you fly the aircraft. The second thing, guess what the second thing is? You wind your watch. Like, what does that have to do with anything? Well, it's a mental reset, right? You fly the aircraft, you stay safe, you wind the watch. It's like there are very few things that are going to take you out right now as you sit here. So wind the watch. And now some of you are saying, what do you mean wind the watch? What do you mean watch? In the old days, we used to have watches that you would wind up, and it took a minute for you to wind the watch. And what they're saying is take a breath, stop, think, analyze what's going on around you before you just run off and act. So my pause, anytime I'm in crisis, anytime I'm not feeling God's presence, I pause, I take a deep breath, I wind the watch. Okay, what's really at stake here? I don't think about what I want to do in this situation. I think about what I want to be in this situation first. I want to be the presence of Christ. That then informs what I do, because there are very few things that are going to take me out like that. So as I wind the watch, I have a psalm, Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. You might think I'm making this up. I'm not. There were times, for example, in the aircraft when it's about to hit the fan and things are going crazy, that I was up there going, be still and know that I am God. All right, we got this. That's all it took. What was that, 5 seconds? So 5 seconds can reset your life. 5 seconds can make the difference between reacting and proacting. 5 seconds can make the difference between representing Christ and having a hot mess on your hands. Now, it takes a little practice, and I wish I could say I did it 100% every time. I don't. But more than not, I remember this. Be still and know that I am God. Now you're thinking, well, that's just, just be still and quiet, and, God's presence will take care of all problems and they'll all go away. If you read Psalm 46, I'm going to flip over here real quick. It's written in a time of absolute chaos. The rest of that psalm goes like this: God is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, even though the earth give way. That sounds pretty chaotic. The mountains fall to the heart of the sea, the waters roar and foam. We will not fear. Why? Because God is with us. Be still and know I am God. It all ties together. And it just takes a moment of awareness. So as you go out into the world, the first thing we do is we pause, we reflect. Be still and know I am God, and I am with you. So after we've stopped at the crosswalk, the second thing that we need to do is look both ways. Awesome. Good. Good parenting out there. Awesome. We need to clear. But in my case, I'm talking about clear the clutter. Clear all the stuff that's going on. Clear the voices. Clear the distractions. There's so many voices in our head these days. It's hard to hear the one that matters. So clear the clutter. Let Jesus speak. You can't follow if you don't hear. You can't go if you don't see. So clear the clutter. I'm going to challenge you. Here's a New Year's resolution if you're searching for one or if you're not. Now you've got one. I want you to identify one thing that distracts you from the presence of Jesus in 2025. And then figure out a substitute that you're going to do instead of that thing that will refocus you on Jesus. Is it doom scrolling? Is it, I don't know, whatever it is for you. What are you going to substitute that puts you back in touch with Jesus? That's my challenge to you. Now, the verse that I put here is kind of the ultimate goal. Seek first the kingdom of God. I'm thinking, well, that sounds like another platitude, but look at the context of what he's talking about. He's talking about the worries that we have in this world in Matthew chapter 6. He's talking about all the things that we care about, the clothing, where am I going to live, what am I going to eat, how am I going to be? No, don't worry about that. Seek first the kingdom of God, and what's the rest of it? Anybody know?
And all these things will be added.
And all these things will be added to you. So it's about focus, intentional focus. So after we've stopped and then we've looked both ways, it's time to go. Thank you. Awesome. So God is a God who is not a spectator sport. I don't know if you've noticed this. When Jesus comes to earth, he says things like, follow me. When he leaves the earth, he says things like, go and make disciples. He's not a God of static, sitting here looking at each other. He's not a God where you come in and you watch a show and you go, oh, that was awesome. No, he says, follow me. He sends us places. So as we prepare to go, we have to be ready to go where he leads. If we've done a good job at pausing, if we've done a good job at clearing the clutter, we'll know exactly what he's telling us to do. Now, the only question is, will we have the courage to follow where he sends us? Proverbs says it this way: commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established. People ask me all the time, I don't know what God's will is for me. My first question is, are you working for him or for you? Because if you're working for him, according to Proverbs, your plans will be established and you'll know. It might be an audible voice. It might be people talking to you. It might be that intuition, the little hairs that stand up on the back of your head. It might be any number of things. But if you commit your work to the Lord, I'm convinced that he'll let you know where to go and what to do. So, as we wrap up, the question that I proposed in the early part was, is God with us? I can categorically say yes. It was foretold and retold. Foretold by the angel Gabriel. His name shall be Emmanuel, God with us. Retold by Jesus himself. One of the last things that he says when he physically left this earth was, after go and make disciples, and I will be with you always, even to the end of the age. Is Jesus trustworthy? Does he do what he says he'll do? You bet he does. When he says, I will be with you to the end of the age, do we have good reason to believe that he will be with us to the end of the age? You bet. Is God with us? Categorically, yes, but that's not the real question today. Here's the real question. Am I with God? Am I with God? Have I taken time to reconnect? Have I taken courageous steps to follow? Am I walking in his ways or making my own? Because if we will do all of that, we will find our way home spiritually. So, Word Serve, my challenge in 2025 is to pause, to clear, to go, and oh, by the way, welcome home. Let's pray. God, thank you for a spiritual home. You call us there all the time, but we tend to forget. We tend to be distracted. We tend to let the world pull us away from the things that you have for us. God, help us as we enter into this new year, as we enter into this season of your Son's arrival, to prepare for his spiritual re-arrival. Maybe we've forgotten, maybe we've gotten too busy, maybe we just have another excuse that we won't put to words. But God, whatever that is, I pray that you would blow that aside today. You're the creator of the universe. You can do anything you want. So God, we know that that expectation is there, that invitation is there. So God, I pray that you would help us to lay down everything that stands in the way and help us to follow you with confidence that we are your children. And God, I pray for all the distractions to fade aside in the light of your glory. I pray for all the distractions to simply melt away as we focus on you in this season. And I pray that as we see you, we'll want to follow you all the more because we love you. And God, help us try to love you the way that you love us, by the power of your Spirit and in your Son's holy name. Amen.